It begins in the dead of night over the most contested stretch of water on the planet, the Strait of Hormuz, where a U.S. Army Apache helicopter is on routine patrol, blades cutting through the warm Persian Gulf air, crews scanning the dark surface below for the Iranian vessels and drones that have haunted this corridor since the war began in February. Then, without warning, an Iranian drone closes the distance and the collision sends the aircraft spinning into the sea. The Apache goes down off the coast of Oman, both crew members plunging into the dark water below. And within minutes, every military command center from Washington to Bahrain is on high alert, because what just happened in the Strait of Hormuz is not just a crash, it is a flashpoint, and the world is about to feel it. An unmanned U.S. Navy boat races to the scene and rescues both crew members within approximately 2 hours. The pilots are safe, uninjured, and now at the center of a geopolitical storm that is escalating by the hour. President Donald Trump is briefed on the situation and immediately takes to Truth Social with a message that leaves zero room for ambiguity. The Iranians shot down one of our highly sophisticated Apache helicopters while patrolling over the Strait of Hormuz. There were 2 pilots involved. Both are safe and uninjured. Nevertheless, the United States must, of necessity, respond to this attack. The drone involved in the collision was assigned to the Navy's Task Force 59, the Navy's first dedicated uncrewed and artificial intelligence maritime security unit established in 2021, whose entire mission is surveillance and enforcement across the Strait of Hormuz and the Suez Canal. Those 2 sentences from the president, "Both pilots are fine, and we are responding anyway," tell you everything about where the United States is right now in this war, because this is no longer about pilots or helicopters. This is about dominance over the most critical 21-mile-wide waterway on the face of the Earth, through which roughly 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply normally flows, and Washington has made crystal clear that Iran will not be allowed to control it, threaten it, or hold it hostage one day longer than absolutely necessary. The backdrop to this confrontation is a conflict that has been building since Operation Epic Fury, launched on February 28, 2026, when the United States and Israel began conducting joint strikes on Iran, numbering nearly 900 in just the first 12 hours, an opening salvo that obliterated Iranian military infrastructure, killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and triggered one of the most intense cascading retaliatory barrages the modern Middle East has ever seen. Iran responded to those initial strikes with retaliatory missile and drone attacks, targeting U.S. embassies, military installations, and oil infrastructure, including vessels across the entire Middle East, a broad retaliation intended to exact costs and pressure adversaries into mediation. The conflict disrupted global travel and trade, halted flights in and out of the Middle East, and forced massive shipping reroutes to avoid both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. But now, months into the war, the United States thought it had reached a moment of cautious optimism. Just hours before the Apache went down, President Trump told reporters there was a good chance of signing a nuclear deal in 2 or 3 days, projecting a rare tone of diplomatic confidence over a conflict that has ground on through wave after wave of destruction. Vice President J.D. Vance echoed that sentiment, telling CBS that the administration felt positioned to achieve a deal that would address Iran's nuclear program not just for the duration of the Trump presidency, but for the long term, adding that "we still got some wood to chop, but that the goal was within reach." And then an Iranian drone ends that moment of optimism in a collision over the Hormuz, and within hours, the war is escalating again with American fighter jets screaming toward Iranian territory. At 5 p.m. Eastern Time on June 9, 2026, U.S. Central Command issues the order. CENTCOM forces begin launching what it calls self-defense strikes against Iran at the Commander-in-Chief's direction, in direct response to the downing of the Apache helicopter, describing the mission as a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression. U.S. Air Force and Navy fighter jets are both involved in the attacks, precision platforms, precision munitions, precision targets, and the target list tells you exactly what Washington is trying to do to Iran's ability to threaten the strait. CENTCOM announces that U.S. forces struck Iranian air defense sites, ground control stations, and surveillance radar installations near the Strait of Hormuz. Think out what that list of targets means strategically. air defenses, ground control stations, radar. The United States is not hitting population centers. It is not striking ports or refineries. It is systematically blinding and disarming the Iranian military's ability to see and respond along the strait, the same stretch of water where Iranian forces have been enforcing a stranglehold on global oil shipments since the war began. And that stranglehold is exactly what Trump has vowed to break as part of any deal to end the conflict. Iran's state broadcaster IRIB reports explosions rocking Qeshm Island, the ports of Sirik and Jask, and the city of Bandar Abbas during the first wave of American strikes, and then a second wave rolls in hours later, hitting Jask again as U.S. forces tighten their grip on the Iranian military apparatus guarding the strait's eastern approaches. Qeshm Island is considered the heart of Iran's arch defense near the strait. It's not a peripheral target. It is the spine of Iran's entire defensive posture at the choke point. Bandar Abbas, the southern port city also struck in the attack, hosts both a key Iranian naval base and an air base, two of the most critical military facilities in the entire southern theater of this war. Jask, the third major location struck, has both a naval presence and houses a key shipping port strategically positioned to the east of the strait, meaning the United States is not just hitting one point of Iranian maritime power near the Hormuz, it is hitting three simultaneously. The strikes also damaged a communications tower in Sirik and destroyed two water reservoirs in the Bamani district, cutting off the area's water supply, according to IRGC statements and Iranian state media. The IRGC characterizing the American attack as strikes under false pretexts against civilian infrastructure, while Washington maintains every target was a legitimate military installation. After the strikes conclude, Trump tells reporters the latest American response was very strong, very powerful, and a U.S. official tells CNN the strikes were designed as a warning shot and that Washington believes the action will not hinder ongoing negotiations to end the war. But Iran does not see a warning shot. Iran sees an act of war that demands a direct response, and Tehran does not hesitate. The IRGC announces it has targeted a U.S. Navy vessel, battleship Tabanak, marking a new measure of Iranian retaliation and drawing the entire conflict into deeper waters.
Military base in Jordan and launched strikes against the U.S. Fifth Fleet's naval base in Bahrain, the same Bahrain base that has been targeted repeatedly throughout this conflict, as Iran attempts to strike the command and control infrastructure of American naval power projection in the Gulf. Air raid sirens sound in both Bahrain and Kuwait as local authorities announce they are actively intercepting what they describe as hostile aerial targets, the skies over the Gulf again filling with the sound of missile intercepts and the distant thunder of explosions that have become the terrifying soundtrack of this region since February. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had already put the world on notice after the U.S. strikes, posting bluntly that no attack from the United States would be left unanswered, and then issuing a chilling warning to all foreign military forces in the region: leave our region if you want to be safe. House Speaker Mike Johnson confirms he was notified in advance of today's strikes on Iran, describing them as proportional and limited, targeting Iranian radar, missile, and command and control sites, and calling the strikes a necessary response to unjustified Iranian aggression. The word proportional is doing a tremendous amount of work right now, because proportional means Washington is trying to calibrate its response in a way that punishes Iranian behavior without triggering a full resumption of major combat operations, the kind of comprehensive strike campaign that defined the first weeks of Operation Epic Fury in late February and early March, when American B-2 stealth bombers, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and attack drones pounded over 1,000 Iranian targets in a single 24-hour window. Throughout this conflict, U.S. forces have deployed A-10 Warthog ground attack aircraft to bombard Iranian vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, while AH-64 Apache attack helicopters, the very platform now at the center of this escalation, have been used to strike Iraq-based Iran-aligned militia groups believed to be firing drones across the Middle East. General Dan Kane vowed that the U.S. would destroy Iran's military capabilities along the Strait of Hormuz, stating that American forces were flying further east and penetrating deeper into Iranian airspace to hunt and kill one-way attack drones, the same category of weapon that brought down the Apache that set off tonight's exchange. Kane also confirmed that U.S. forces dropped 5,000-pound penetrator weapons into underground storage facilities in Iran during earlier operations, bunker-busting ordnance designed specifically to reach hardened targets buried beneath layers of reinforced concrete and rock. The strategic logic of the American approach has been consistent throughout this conflict: degrade Iran's ability to project military power across its borders, dismantle the radar and missile systems that give Iranian forces eyes and teeth along the strait, and enforce freedom of navigation in a waterway that the global economy depends on. Because Iran has maintained a stranglehold on the strait since the U.S. and Israel launched the war, and Trump has vowed to restore traffic through the vital shipping lane as a core condition of any agreement to end the conflict. The Apache helicopter incident crystallizes the central paradox at the heart of this war at this exact moment. The United States is simultaneously fighting and negotiating, dropping bombs while sitting at the table, trying to signal strength to Iran while leaving enough diplomatic runway for a deal to still land. Attempts to renegotiate a nuclear deal throughout 2025 and 2026 were unsuccessful, and America and Israel calculated that with Iran weakened by years of sanctions, devastated by the 12-day war with Israel in June 2025, and stripped of its key proxy militias, military means offered more leverage than diplomacy alone. The calculation was brutal but straightforward: hit Iran hard enough that it has no choice but to accept terms it would never have accepted from a position of strength, and then hold the door open just wide enough that Tehran can walk through it without losing face entirely. Vice President Vance articulated the endgame directly, saying the administration's goal is a deal that addresses Iran's nuclear program not just for now, but for the long term, a permanent structural solution, not a temporary pause. That is the prize at the end of this campaign: the elimination of Iran's nuclear ambitions as a long-term threat to the Middle East and to American allies. But the road to that deal is running through burning naval installations on Qeshm Island and IRGC radar sites reduced to smoldering craters along the Strait of Hormuz tonight. The cycle of escalation reached a particularly sharp edge on June 8th, when the IDF announced strikes on military sites in central and western Iran, with explosions reported in Tehran, Isfahan, and Tabriz, triggering a fresh exchange between Israel and Iran. And on that same day, CENTCOM announced that American forces had disabled an unladen oil tanker heading to Qeshm Island after it allegedly ignored multiple warnings, adding another layer of confrontation to an already boiling theater. Iran later stated it had ceased military actions against Israel following the June 8th exchange, and Israel stopped strikes on Iran at Trump's request, a fragile pause that lasted approximately 1 day before the Apache went down and the whole cycle accelerated again. This is the rhythm of this war: brief pauses that feel like progress, followed by incidents that snap the tension back to its breaking point, each cycle testing whether the two sides are genuinely moving toward an agreement or simply catching their breath before the next escalation. The Strait of Hormuz remains the ultimate pressure point, 21 miles wide at its narrowest, bordered by Iran on its northern shore, watched by the world for any sign of what comes next, because what flows through that strait does not just power automobiles and heat homes, it powers the global economy, and every missile that explodes near its approaches sends tremors through energy markets from New York to Tokyo. The American military infrastructure assembled in the region for this conflict represents the largest U.S. military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Multiple carrier strike groups, Marine Expeditionary Units, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, all deployed to a theater that has now become the defining military engagement of the Trump administration's second term. The men and women operating in this environment are doing so under conditions of extraordinary danger. Iranian drones swarm the airspace, IRGC fast boats patrol the waters, and the entire apparatus of Iranian proxy power from Yemen to Iraq remains capable of launching attacks across the region at any moment, even as Iran's core military capacity has been dramatically degraded by months of American and Israeli strikes. Tonight's exchange, Apache down, Qeshm struck, Bandar Abbas hit, IRGC firing back at Bahrain and Jordan, sirens over Kuwait, is not the end of something or the beginning of something entirely new. It is the continuation of a war that has already fundamentally reshaped the Middle East and that is now in what military analysts call the coercive bargaining phase, where each side is simultaneously inflicting pain and watching for the other's breaking point, both trying to determine whether the next escalation produces a deal or a disaster. The U.S. official tells CNN that additional strikes against Iran are expected, meaning tonight's exchanges are not a conclusion but a prelude, another chapter in a campaign that Trump and his military commanders believe is relentlessly moving Iran toward the negotiating table. The question hanging over the Persian Gulf tonight is whether the Apache helicopter that went down in the Hormuz darkness and the CENTCOM jets that answered it with precision strikes across Qeshm and Bandar Abbas and Jask pushed Iran toward that table or pushed the deal further away. And right now, nobody in Washington or Tehran can answer that question with certainty. What we know is this: 2 American pilots are safe, Iranian radar installations are burning, explosions have rocked the IRGC's arch defense position on Qeshm Island, the 5th Fleet base in Bahrain is under Iranian drone and missile attack, and the Trump administration is still insisting a deal is days away, even as the missiles fly. This is the 2026 Iran war in its current form, simultaneously negotiating and fighting, simultaneously destroying and dealing, a conflict unlike any the modern Middle East has produced, playing out in real time over the most critical waterway on the planet, with the entire world watching every explosion reflected in the rising cost of oil and the falling confidence of global markets. Stay with this channel as this story continues to develop. The night is not over, the strikes are not finished, and the next 48 hours may determine whether this war finds its exit ramp or accelerates toward a confrontation that no one in the region or beyond it will be able to contain.